Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today we have two new guests gracing our channel, Prasiddha Sudhakar and Parth Parihar. Prasiddha and Parth, welcome to PGurus channel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excited to be here.
Prasiddha, you are someone that I have been following quite keenly because of what happened at Rutgers, and we're going to come to that a little bit later. But what I'd like to do is to first introduce you. Prasiddha Sudhakar is the incoming president of the Hindu Students Council at Rutgers University. She's passionate about advocacy and Hindu-related causes. And Parth Parihar is the director of advocacy at Hindu Students Council. Prior to this, he was the president at the Hindu Students Council. He is currently pursuing his PhD at Princeton University. In addition to these two gentlemen and lady, we have a very special guest, Nikunj Trivedi, who was on PGurus a few days back. Nikunj, welcome to PGurus channel.
Excited to be here again. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for your patience. We've had some technical difficulties and we've gotten over all those things, and we are set for a very interesting conversation. What we are going to talk today about is the life of a student in the universities across America. We have three students who have lived it all, and one or two are still continuing to pursue their studies. And how are they experiencing life? I mean, I can tell you how life was when I was a student of 30 odd years ago. There were probably 40, 50 students, if any, in a campus, and it's a very small Hindu community, but it was a very tightly knit community. I think things have changed since then. Nikunj explained a little bit about how life is in various campuses. So today, I'd like Prasiddha to start on what she's doing and where she is and how she experiencing life at Rutgers University. Prasiddha.
Yeah. So last year at Rutgers, I was the technology chair for Hindu Students Council, and honestly, like Hindu Students Council was kind of like revamped in the 2019-2020 year. So it was like finding my community of people who had like-minded thoughts, had the same beliefs, who would understand certain customs, certain traditions. Like for example, I wear the bindi, so like that's a very like Hindu thing. So yeah, in Hindu Students Council, we host a lot of events related to Hinduism, learning more about Hinduism, Hindu philosophy, culture events. So for example, we had a Seva Gala for Diwali, and we raised money for the Ekal Vidyalaya charity. So we have a lot of these nice like events where we get to know other Hindus on campus and celebrate these events. So some of our biggest events are Holi, but sadly it got canceled this year because of COVID. But yeah, we have like Amar Chitrakada reading night because I personally loved reading those as a child, and just like having someone bring in these comics and like reading all these stories again was awesome. So it's really nice to have like a community of Hindus who follow these same traditions, grew up in the same way, have the same beliefs and all.
You took me back to my childhood memories. As a matter of fact, I unearthed a link to a bunch of PDFs that are showing the Amar Chitrakada comics in their color form. These are free for a download. I think I have that link stashed away somewhere. Now I'll put that link when we publish this thing. So thank you so much, Prasiddha. Now, Parth, viewers, you may have seen Parth interviewing Professor Subhash Kak for Infinity Foundation. And I've seen a few of those videos, very erudite, extremely engaging, and it's a pleasure to have you today with us, Parth. Parth, why don't you share with us your thoughts and your experiences of being a student in the university campuses of the United States of America?
Yeah, so thanks again, Sri, for having me. So I'm currently pursuing my PhD in economics at Princeton University, and before that I was an undergraduate there as well. I would say that the campus climate in this particular year, this school year, has been much worse for Hindu students compared to previous years. And this has been as a result of the way in which the first, the Kashmir lockdown was presented on campus, followed by, of course, the way that the Citizenship Amendment Act was presented on campus. So I think a lot of the blowback to this has come in the way of a lot of events that are organized officially by the university departments, such as the Department in Politics, mostly the South Asian Studies Department as well, that tend to view Kashmir and tend to view the Citizenship Amendment Act through a very particular stylized lens, and one that doesn't tell the story of the persecution that was faced, for example, in the case of the CAA, by the Hindus and the Sikhs, the Christians, the Bauds, the Parsis, who were protected under this piece of legislation. So I think one of the challenges that Hindu students often face on campus, that I think was particularly magnified in this school year, was how do they speak about their identity in the realm of global affairs and current politics that are happening? Because there is an overwhelming sense of shame in needing to constantly defend, even identifying personally as a Hindu person, just among peers or among colleagues, in the case of graduate students and professors, that I think we often face on campus.
I've said this in the past, and I'll say this again, Parth and Prasiddha and Nikunj. It's not the size of the dog in the fight; it's the size of the fight and the dog. And I'll give you a real example why I say this. In the just concluded elections in the United Kingdom, a lot of stuff that PGurus brought out resulted in a very decisive win for the Conservatives. Does it mean that all British Hindus should vote Conservative? Absolutely not. What it is at this particular point of time, they look like a better alternative. And we didn't stop there. We have been also encouraging the Labour to say, get your act together. We need you also to be there to make this a very healthy democracy. And things are happening in that direction. But the reason I want to say this is because sometimes, yes, you may have to be on the defensive. And I'll add a little bit more perspective a little bit later about the CAA and the timeline between 370 and then the Ram Mandir verdict and CAA. What I understood from talking to some people in the know. Nikunj, why don't you explain how it has been for you as a student, and you've been actively involved. You're the chairman of HSC, and I've seen you very actively across various cultural festivals and things like that. How was your experience as a student, and how do you think it is now compared to what it was then?
Sure, and thank you again for having us. What's important is that things have changed, but they have stayed the same. Over the years, when I was a student, a little while ago, and now I'm the chairman of HSC, back in the days, what it used to be is still that same misconceptions about the Hindu traditions. People are thinking caste, cow, and curry type of thing. Just that whole concept that people just don't understand us, right? They only understood us through the Bollywood, through the kind of the Holi, Diwali, like the musty, fun stuff. And that's what the Hindus were about. But when it came to the deeper philosophical start, the yoga, the meditation, the Ayurveda, right? All that stuff was apparently not Hindus all of a sudden, because yoga could not be Hindu. How could it be part of the same system that it has the caste system in it, right? So there was this whole concept that, you can't have the two at the same time. They're not compatible. So that was the original. Now what has happened is over the last several years, a new generation has come about. And they are more and more removed from the Indian roots, or the roots that are coming from the Indian aspect of it. So essentially what happens is now they're saying, okay, we're Americans. We don't have anything to do with India, generally speaking, except for maybe this Hinduism part, right? So they're concerned more about issues happening here. That's great. But at the same time, when issues happen in India, they tend to just go to the side that Parth was talking about, right? As if like India is this monstrous location that is, basically suppressing minorities, 200 million Muslims, as, famously claimed by Bernie Sanders, for example. All these like misconceptions. So not only now the misconceptions about yoga or the caste are there, they're now being, a whole new mix is being added here. And the new concoction is becoming extremely dangerous. I would say that there are positive things on college campuses that I've seen. A lot of people who are not Hindus, for example, they are genuinely interested in understanding. I think sometimes we lack as a community to be better advocates for our tradition. So a lot of times, some people who are non-Hindus, like white people or black people, etc., they want to learn about our tradition in a genuine manner. But sometimes it's shame on us that we don't engage them properly. We kind of wash it away and say, oh, everything's the same. Oh, I don't really understand it. I'm not really sure what that really means. So they get turned off by it, right? and they gravitate towards whatever narrative is out there. So if you're not going to give the positive narrative, they're going to go to the South Asian department and say, well, these guys know what they're talking about. So they're saying the caste system is horrible. They're saying, look, we are blacks and we have been segregated in America. Similarly, there are people in India that are being segregated. So the Black Lives Matter movement then starts to empathize with the anti-Hindu movement in that sense. So like there's this superimposition of these causes that are not necessarily related, but because there's a vacuum that is not being provided by us as a community, people naturally gravitate to what the loudest narrative out there is. So I think that's also important for us to keep in mind. So while there are issues on campuses, I think we also have to take ownership of the fact that we are not doing a good job putting that narrative out there. And HSC obviously is trying to do that.
Absolutely, and I agree with you that we're not doing enough to try and bring this out. One of the interesting things that happened, if you look back at the history of India, how things came to where they are. The first big blow was in 1821 when Lord Macaulay said that I'm going to get rid of all the gurukuls and the universities. There were close to 120 plus universities at that point. And all those things were more or less shuttered, and then English was made the language of instruction, and not everybody could deal with this new language like a flip of a switch. Some were successful and others were not. And that's where the first big cultural divide happened. Now, if you go back and read Dharampal's book about A Beautiful Tree, he talks about the composition of all these different schools. And in that, it will be very apparent to you that there was no discrimination of whatsoever. It was who needed to learn what, they came and learned from there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. There are some videos on PGurus that talk about this at length. So you can, viewers are welcome to go back and look at those things. Let me ask you this. Now let's get into some specifics. First one is about the Holi. That this is a new thing that came up, saying that Holi is a festival that is being only celebrated by upper caste, and it's also a form of oppression. This was started by a student, and I think she is a Yeli, if I'm not wrong. If one of you could perhaps take the initiative and talk us through a little bit more about what has been happening. Is this something that we should be giving credence to? Is it something that we should be rebutting effectively? Or is it something that is going to go away very soon? What are your thoughts, Nikunj? Maybe you can decide who can answer the question, and then I'll yield the floor.
Maybe we start with Parth, and then we can pass it to Prasiddha.
Sure.
Sure. So Holi Against Hindutva, which was the event, and originally the name of the group also, which is now called Students Against Hindutva, was started in late 2019 around the winter break, where there were this group of students from Yale originally, and then it went and expanded out to many different universities, I think around 20 different universities, where they were protesting the CAA and NRC that happened in India. And specifically, they wanted to use the day of Holi to protest the way in which Hindutva was being weaponized by the Indian government to push these pieces of legislation. That was their narrative. So on the day of Holi, they wanted to hold protests across different campuses. Instead of playing with colored powder, they wanted to play with white powder, and instead of wearing white clothes, they wanted to wear black clothes. Now that in and of itself is pretty bad. Just using a Hindu festival by a group that is not specifically representing or invested in the Hindu community to further a socio-political cause, that in and of itself, whether or not you agree with the actual causes, is condemnable. But then afterwards, what also happened was that their messaging around Holi changed pretty markedly. So around February or so, they started saying that, no, actually Holi is also a day just to be protested based on what Holi represents itself, not just the way that the CAA and NRC are being used, but this day itself is also something to be protested, because Holika was a Bahujan who was discriminated against, who was oppressed by the Brahmins. That was their narrative. So you can also see the way that this narrative has a likeness to the earlier narratives that we saw in places like JNU around, Navratri, for example, treating Mahishasura Mardini as a white oppressor of Mahishasura, a Bahujan, a person who's not actually a Rakshasa in their view. So you can see the way that these narratives are coming over from the Indian left. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that the student group is, being directed and being advised by people from equality labs, as well as other individual professors also who have these types of troubling views. So I would urge people not to direct their anger necessarily at the students, because I think that's something that I've seen happening. And I also want to say that I think that that's not a particularly generative or a particularly righteous approach here.
Prasiddha?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I'm going to go with an example that actually happened at Rutgers campus by one of the board of advisors of Students Against Hindutva, Audrey Trushke. So around February, she organized a anti-CAA protest, which she tweeted out on her Twitter. And, she pretended as though it was done by the whole of the Rutgers Professors Association and their union. But in fact, like when you looked into it further, you knew that there was actually no one else who was behind it aside from just Trushke herself. So on the day itself, there was also another counter protest for that to actually say, no, we support CAA, just run by college students. So on the same day, in the same location, at the same time, there was a anti-CAA protest and a pro-CAA protest. Well, not pro-CAA protest, but pro-CAA like celebration. So on the day, like when it actually happened, there were about like 10 or 15 students who showed up. All of them were just Audrey Trushke's students. And then when you asked them, what is CAA? They were like, 200 million Muslims are going to be stripped of citizenship. I would be out there protesting if 200 million Muslims were going to be stripped of Indian citizenship. But in fact, they didn't even know what it was. And then I asked someone else, like, who sort of had a little bit of a better understanding. And they were like, oh, my friend who's Afghani can't get citizenship because of CAA. And I said, no, they can, apply through a normal path. But then she was like, oh, no, I don't trust the government. They're fascist. And it's like, okay, so you have like no evidence or whatsoever to even like say such a thing. It's just just like saying something for the sake of, oh, I maybe read it somewhere, and that's basically it. So then when you just question these people more about all of this, they were just, maybe like American-born Indians or Hindus or, non-Hindus or Indian-born, like whatever. But basically they were protesting a law from a country which they're not from, and a country they didn't even know anything about, from a culture they don't know anything about. So it was clearly like, again, like I agree with Parth in saying that it's not really the students here, it's really about like being misguided. And another thing I'd really like to add to that is the anti-CAA poster that Audrey Trushke used had a picture of Aisha Rana, which is extremely dangerous because Aisha Rana is the same, I think Jamia Millia Islamia activist who basically was really upset when Yaqub Menon, a terrorist, died. And the other one who I think she was with, I think it was like Ladida Shaklun or something like that. She also was celebrating when Pulwama happened and 40 Indian soldiers were killed. So if I say like, oh, I'm protesting for human rights and use a picture of someone who sympathized with terrorists, it's clear that I'm not protesting human rights. That's in itself contradictory. So I really think, yeah, it's definitely just a huge misrepresentation of like what's actually going on. So I mentioned this anti-CAA protest example just to show like this is exactly what Holi against Hindutva is as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nikunj, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, they've laid out the points very nicely. I think my thing is, as Parth mentioned, it's not about the students. I think what they're being directed and driven by these professors as well as outsiders. And there are certain agendas behind it. They're very, very clear. As the progression of Holi against Hindutva went on, if you go to their website now they're called Students Against Hindutva Ideology. When you look at who's behind it, right, you have groups that are South Asian / Muslim / these Dalit groups that are claiming to be fighting for Dalits and stuff like that. But when you look at them, their language is completely anti-Hindu, right? I'll give you an example, very small example that Parth was talking about. How do they frame the Holi? Okay, and excuse me, I'm going to say this on this channel, but the way they post it is Holi is a casteist, misogynistic, violent religion or festival where males throw stones and semen at females.
Where did they learn this stuff?
There's, that's a different conversation. This is what's being taught to students, okay? That this is why you need to disown and not celebrate Holi. And they have strategies of how not to celebrate Holi, right? Now, this is a direct attack on a Hindu festival because Holi is one of the most popular festivals on college campuses. It's extremely popular. Thousands of students, when HSC organizes events, thousands of students come together to celebrate the message of unity, message of harmony, message of getting along, peace, all these. These are the messages that Holi brings to the table, not some misogynistic, violent tradition. Nobody today, if you go and ask, except for these people, if you go and ask any regular white person or anybody else saying, hey, what do you think Holi is, right? They're going to be saying, oh, this is a wonderful festival. Everybody comes together. We'll have a lot of fun in the colors. We're enjoying each other's company, things like that. No one's saying, man, it's a violent, misogynistic, casteist, blah, 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 tradition that should be disowned. That's the narrative that these people want. Now, the challenge here, though, is that if you say this lie 1,000 times, it becomes true.
Yes.
Now, I'll give you an example of how this is going on. And this is really important. So the Holi against Hindutva started first, right? Then they started to add, first it was about the CAA. Now, if you go to their website, they have a whole agenda. They stand against Kashmir, basically like the free Kashmir type of movement. Then they have, this violent, misogynistic, casteist stuff in there. All this, a whole list of things. So all of a sudden they morphed into their real agenda now. And one can see that. Not only that, but Audrey Trutchke now is on the board of advisors of Holi against Students Against Hindutva Ideology. So now she's officially peddling hate out there. Not that she was not doing that before. Now she's officially there. Now the dangerous part about that is what she's doing is in Seattle in 2021, January, she's on a panel that's going to talk about Hindutva. Now, I'm not going to go into the discussion of Hindutva because that's not relevant here. My problem is, and again, I'm going to say this again, my problem is not about the discussion of Hindutva. It's a separate discussion. My problem is weaponizing Hinduism, weaponizing our festivals, weaponizing our symbols, weaponizing our practices against us. And that's where Professor Audrey Trutchke and others are doing this disservice to the Hindu community as well as to the world, because they're painting a completely morphed and warped picture of who really are. So she's taking that piece of Hindutva and now she's putting into academia and showing, look, Hindutva is on campus, you should be opposing it, and targeting Hindu students for no fault of their own.
This is where the role of all of us Sanatanis comes into play. If you don't start effectively rebutting these things with facts, then what happens is the silent majority will tend to think, oh, maybe there is some element of truth in what these people are saying. And like you said, a lie told 1,000 times over becomes the truth. Now, there was also another interesting incident that I wanted Prasiddha to talk about. And Parth and Nikunj, feel free to chime in. And this is regarding the Vivek Agnihotri talk that was supposed to have taken place in Rutgers. Prasiddha, why don't you kind of give us a little bit more about the inside story on that? And at the end, I'll just say about what happened in the CAA and so on. I've been promising everyone, but I will hold it back for a minute. Please go ahead,
if I can just interrupt for a second.
Sure.
I want to make an important point here.
Sure.
Over the last couple of months, HSC has come under attack. And many people on Twitter and stuff like that have been attacking us, saying, you guys are cowards. You don't do anything. You should have protested. You should have filed lawsuits and this and that. It's very easy to say. It's very easy to say. And what people don't understand is that what is the pressure on college campuses? If HSC and Hindu students had $10 million and a backing of the community, believe me, we will do it. But we are left hanging on the stage when these things happen, and the community sometimes it's hard to find them, or they'll come and pat our back and say, good job, beta, you've done a good job, now go and do what you need to do. But when we want to go and file these lawsuits, where's the money? Right. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because I want viewers to understand that it's not that we're not doing anything. There's also things that are happening that we can't just keep disclosing out there in the public as to what we're doing and how we're approaching these things.
Absolutely.
So for the record, I just wanted to kind of put it out there before Prasiddha proceed further.
Yeah, you don't want to play your hand. Absolutely. I completely agree and second that. Prasiddha, please, your floor is yours.
Oh, so this is a long story, a word is short, so I'll try and...
We have the time. Go ahead.
So when this whole thing started, when I first came to hear of it from, the president of HSC Rutgers at the time, it was just something where, Vivek Agnihotri ji is coming in to talk about Kashmiri Pandits who were slaughtered, ethnically cleansed from Kashmir Valley in 1990. Nothing more, nothing less. This was about a week before the event actually happened. So in that small time frame of like maybe 2 or 3 days before the event, I think Stand with Kashmir, which is this pro-Pakistan aligning group, because, well, one thing that I've noticed is they say they want self-determination, but have you ever seen them criticize, for example, ethnic cleansing of all the Hindus who are on the other side of in POK and not the, the India side? So like nothing else is like questioned there at all. So even though they say they want self-determination for all the people of Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, etc., it's just an anti-India group. So I guess they found out about this event, and then a huge smear campaign went on social media. So of course, there was another professor at Rutgers who basically said, oh, look, Vivek Agnihotri is a sexual predator and is Islamophobe. Why is Hindu Students' Council hosting the hate speaker?
Did they put it in writing?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
And, I'm not going to go into that because I'm not qualified.
Sure.
So then this was one professor, but of course, Audrey Trushke then, found out about this through her Twitter, and she literally said, this does not provide educational value. Now, I want to say why that is so dangerous, because let's say I hold an event about like what's going on to people in Yemen, for example, in the war, like civil war and bombings by Saudi Arabia. And then if a Yemeni survivor came in and I said, oh, but that doesn't add educational value, that's like whitewashing the entire thing that they have been through, and so many, almost millions of people have gone through. So to say that is just like purely offensive, and it's done out of nothing but hatred. But yeah, so then anyway, going on. So basically there was very serious attempts to stop Vivek Agnihotri from speaking at Rutgers. And so many people called, Rutgers University Student Assembly, they called the administration, they were like, how dare you let him talk? But what's really crazy to me is every other religious group is allowed to, advocate for their people. Because we're not saying like, no one has ever said, oh, let's harm this community or that community. Nothing. It was honestly just, we need to tell the stories of Hindus whose voices have not been heard for more than 30 years now. Not a single like effort has been taken to, bring them back to their homeland. I mean, perhaps after 370, yeah, but like not aside from that, really like nothing. So it was just, us advocating for like our side of the story, and like for us, Hindus to be heard, because there's nowhere that he says that he's against any community, he's against Muslims, like that. He never, ever says that. Like I actually was really moved by like the things that were being said there, because, there was a story, for example, of Girija Tikku, who's like literally got gang raped by militant and then sought alive. Like if this is Islamophobia or hatred or hate speech against someone, I actually don't know what to say, because this is the reality of what happened to Kashmiri Hindus. And apparently if we say that, that's a racist thing to say. And then so after the event, there were all these allegations of like, oh, they beat up a Muslim student, which is also completely not true. You can see it on camera. Nothing like that ever happened. And then other allegations like, oh, we should, stop funding Hindu Students' Council because they're racist and they hosted all these hate speakers. But the thing is that really, I can't really say I'm surprised, because at Rutgers University in the past, there have been people who have openly advocated for Hamas, which is a US designated terrorist organization. And professors have done it, students have done it. And what action has university taken, even though they've received complaints? Nothing, absolutely nothing. So am I surprised? No, like at this point. But yeah, it's just like, it's really unfortunate that this happened, because, no one was spewing hatred. And, if Vivek Agnihotri did come and say like, I hate X community or Y community, then, that's easily, that you should be complaining. Everyone should be complaining. But just to say that Hindus had died in Kashmir, Hindus were ethnically cleansed, if that's offensive to you, then what makes you different to the terrorists who killed the Hindus?
The truth of the matter is that 3 minority girls are being forcibly taken from their families. They're being raped, and then they're being forcibly converted to Islam all throughout Pakistan. 3 a day, 1,000 a year. And the problem is these people don't have a voice. I've covered stories of Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, and what have you. And this goes on unabated in rural parts of Sindh and in Punjab. Balochistan seems to be relatively less, and I don't have enough information about what is happening in Pak-occupied Kashmir. So next time somebody says that there's a fascist ruler in India, point it out to them that what about these Hindu girls? You know, they basically stalk each house. As soon as a girl's sort of like isolated, they try to snatch her away. Sometimes they even forcibly come to the house, you know, with guns blazing, and then snatch away the girl. So this is the most inhumane thing that's going on. And this is all being encouraged by a guy called Mia Mittu. And I'm amazed that even USCIRF won't mention this individual. It's most of the time this person who's been saying that we have to do this thing. What is wrong with you guys? How can these people turn around and point the finger at India when India has been at the receiving end for so many years? I think I have the answer for this question. The answer is that Pakistan did not expect India to abrogate 370. They said somehow it will be, you know, people pussyfoot around it because they've already seen 5 years of the Modi government. They didn't see anything happen. They thought, okay, well, this is going to continue. That was the first big blow. So that caught them off guard. And then the Ram Mandir, Supreme Court, they thought that Supreme Court will again kick the can down the road and nothing will happen. And that judgment too came. In both these instances, the government was ready. They had, there was some sort of what I would call as, you know, an amber alert to make sure that nothing untoward happened. People had known, police was in the right places, and nothing untoward happened. However, in the case of CAA, it was a routine piece of legislation of normalizing people who've been waiting for the citizenship for many, many, many years. And there was a cutoff date, 31st December 2014. The number was 31,313, 25,000 Hindus, around 5,000 Sikhs, and the remaining comprising of Christians, Parsis, Jews even, and so on. I think the government figured this is a routine piece of legislation. The Congress also had asked for it in the past. They had moved it. And in fact, there is proof of Manmohan Singh as opposition member asking for this in 2003. So there was proof. They said, let's just regularize these guys. They've been suffering for far too long, because this ties in with the 370. And I'll tell you why. See, when at the time of partition, right, people were fleeing Pakistan and they were coming to what they thought was India. They didn't look and see, oh, I'm going to be what is Kashmir Kingdom. They were just running away from Pakistan. And guess what? A lot of people got caught in Jammu and Kashmir area where they didn't have even basic rights. That was what the government was trying to straighten out. And then what happened was, in trying to explain it after the fact, because they were not expecting this kind of a blowback, it just sort of snowballed into, in a bigger situation than what it should have been. But be that as it may, there was no reason for the riots that ensued in 3 universities. And then afterwards, when Trump was there, they just wanted to embarrass the government. And February 24th and 25th, where, if you look at the data that is coming out there, it is horrifying how the Hindu majority shops were cherry-picked. The Sikh shops were cherry-picked for destruction. I mean, you had shop after shop of different religious owners having their shops, and they cherry-picked and hit only those that were either Hindu or Sikh. Now, this is the kind of stuff that happened, and then there's nobody talking about this, and they want Holi to be banned. Come on now, call it both ways. I mean, everybody, each and everyone who's watching this channel, please feel free to share this to all your friends, even those who believe that whatever the other side is saying is true. They need to be able to think about this. There's a copious amount of facts and documentation about what happened to the Kashmiri Hindus, 500,000 of them, stateless. They're still trying to find their feet. They still can't dare go back to the valley, even though on paper everything has been abrogated. But conditions have to improve, and it is happening. It's a gradual phase. I'm sorry, again, I'm taking a lot of time. So I'd just like to have each one of you perhaps take a few minutes and conclude, and then we can try and say what needs to be happening, because with coronavirus, a lot of the initial conditions have changed. A lot of things are going to be happening, at least for the fall semester. perhaps online. I don't know, maybe you guys can tell what is the status in Rutgers, and Parth, you can say about what's happening at Princeton. Are you going back, or are you going to be doing online? I can tell you that California State University, one of the biggest student body in California, is going to have the fall classes. 95% of them are going to be from online, and only those practicals where they need to be present, they're going to have some sort of a process whereby they can maintain social distancing, wear masks, and still get through with the thing. So perhaps Prasiddha, why don't you start, and then afterwards to Parth, and then Nikunj, you can wind it up.
Yeah, so I think Rutgers is still deciding on what they're going to do for the fall semester. They said they're going to figure it out in the next 6 to 8 weeks. But they've either said we're going to slowly transition, maybe like initially do remote and then like go on for the semester, or just have a full remote semester. So they're not really sure. But as for what we can do, I really think it's hard to say because, you know, like obviously like I'm not a parent, I'm still a college student, but I think when you instill such values of, you know, Hindu traditions, Hindu customs, Hindu philosophy, there's a lot of people who like advocate for like saying shlokas every morning or like celebrating this festival and dressing up, and you know, there's all these community events. But I think what's really important is, you know, to be told about the horrors of partition from a young age. Because honestly, my dad, when he started talking to me about India, I was 6 years old. He told me about, he was like, the British split our country into two, India and Pakistan. And he literally said there's an average Indian is no different from an average Pakistani. Like we have more in common with them than like, you know, the non-similarities. So I think like it's really important to then like be respectful to people as people, like irrespective, you know, gender, caste, religion, etc., etc. But like I think it's just really important to talk about these issues from a young age and like told about like, oh, Hindus here and, you know, people being persecuted and etc. So I just think it's just important for like parents and community to instill like, okay, this is happening in the world.
Thank you, Prasiddha. Parth?
Yeah, thanks again, Shri, for having me. I think for Princeton, we still haven't decided a similar boat as Rutgers as to what we're doing for the fall semester. Our spring semester has basically wrapped up. We have exam period right now, so students are taking exams virtually, which is good for me because I don't have to grade students' exams. It's a little bit less work for us grad students. As far as your question about what can your audience members do, I would say the biggest thing I would say, especially for first generation people who are growing up in this country, I think Prasiddha is right. She mentioned the angle about making sure that they understand the context in which a lot of these conflicts are happening, these debates are happening. But I think it's also important that they understand, and this was a point that I think was made by a guest on your previous show, Indumati Vishwanathan, which is that people need to also understand the way in which Hinduism can be a force for good in the world. And yes, this may seem like an obvious thing for many people. It's because people who grew up steeped in Sanatana Dharma, they understand it. But for people who grow up in the West, who don't have that connection necessarily, it's very difficult for them to understand. So when people are, you know, saying all of these things about how Hinduism is casteist, how it imposes a hierarchy, how it's the root of a lot of evil that happens. If you have an NPR editor saying that if only all the Indians would convert out of Hinduism, then all the problems would be solved. If you have those types of people who are speaking and who are being listened to by our generation, then you have a serious problem. And it's our job to provide resources to be able to show people the way in which Hinduism can serve a positive influence, the way it can be pro-social, the way it can fight for social justice. A lot of these movements, whether it's the environmental movement, have roots going back to Hindu philosophy. Whether you talk about the Chipko movement, the word tree hugger comes from the Chipko movement. So I think it's important for people of my age and younger, of course, to understand that first and foremost. Because if you understand that, then it's going to be very difficult for other people to convince you otherwise on the basis of scant evidence. Right? Because if you feel like you truly understand the tradition that you're raised in, and you also have the historical perspective that Prasiddha was mentioning, then it's going to be very difficult for anybody to shake that foundational core faith that you have. So for parents who are looking for resources, Hindu Students Council is more than happy to provide them to them. And I would also encourage them to try and create a community of students, whether it's on their college campus or their high schools. We would love to help them also in doing that.
Awesome, Parth. Wonderful thoughts and very, very clarified, clear thought process there. Thank you so much. Nikunj?
I think Prasiddha and Parth have said everything that I needed to say. Echoing both of their sentiments, I think people need to understand that the bhajan and bhangra are great on both sides, but we need to also understand our history, the concerns, and how does Hinduism or Hindu Dharma can be a force for good in today's world. That's what a lot of students are looking at. They're saying, how can this tradition, which is thousands of years old, help me today? Forget about history, forget about like shlokas, mantras. How can I solve my problems? If I can mantra away my problems, then that'll be great. But can I do that? Right? So that's what the students are looking for. That's what the youth is looking for. So we need to provide that. We want support from the community. Hindu Students Council needs that support, because if we're strong, then we can stand up against some of these things and have our own voice. If you look at various religious groups, right, they get millions of dollars on college campuses. They have nice nice centers for their particular activities. So we need help in getting those things. Similarly, the community needs to understand that they cannot just be an echo chamber. They can't just look at each other and say, hey, everything is fine, because we're not talking about us here. We're talking about outside forces that really have a very different agenda and a very different way of thinking about who we are. And they have been seasoned that way to do that. So that piece is real, and we need to accept it and then deal with it and have good answers to that, as Prasiddha and Parth mentioned.
Absolutely, Nikunj. And it was a pleasure having all three of you on the Hangout today. I'm very sure that we're going to have more such Hangouts. And viewers, I hope you got a feel for what things are at the university campuses in the United States. And this is it's a good thing. Perhaps now is a turn for all of us to rise to the occasion and say, what exactly is Sanatan Dharma? What kind of spiritual leadership it offers to the world? And how every one of us can benefit from this. Thank you very much once again, and we'll be back soon with such engrossing conversations.
Namaste.
Namaskar.
Namaste.
Hi everyone. In the current scenario with the spread of COVID-19, the printed books are on the verge of becoming outdated, and e-books are becoming the mainstream way of reading. You can now read our e-book, Who Painted My Money White, comfortably on the Kindle app on your phone or a tab. So now, I'm going to show you how to download Kindle on your phone. Firstly, open Play Store or App Store depending upon your phone. We are following Play Store process, though the process is similar for both Android and iOS. In the search bar, type Amazon Kindle. Tap the first result to open the application page and press Install. Once installed, press Open to start the application. Use your credentials to log in. If you were already logged into an Amazon account, then you will directly reach the welcome page for the app. Tap on Start Reading and then tap on Get Started. Now in the search bar, type the book name or the author name, and it will show you the relevant results. Tap on the book and then tap on Read for Free. iPhone users can buy the book at a discounted price of just Rs 199. You get a 30 days trial for the app on Android. Tap on the button. On the next screen, press Continue to reach the payment page. After entering your payment details, click on Place Your Order. Once the process is complete, it will show a message saying, "We are setting up your membership." Pressing the cross on the top right corner of the screen will take you back to the book results page. Tap on the book and then tap on Read for Free. It will open a new page. Here you can follow the author and then tap on Read Now. It will now open the ebook and you can happily enjoy reading it.
you.